Alright, so today I discovered kind of a surprise clutch of eggs. It's right at the end of the egg laying season, and I actually had one of my females lay some eggs. As a matter of fact, I was going through my whole collection the other day doing a video, and I was kind of eyeing this one thinking, you know, that female looks fat enough to actually lay some eggs, and sure enough, the very next day, today, she laid some eggs. I actually discovered them this morning, and this is a pretty amazing cross. It's actually an albino het-pied female that I crossed with an albino pied male. So statistically, about 50% of these offspring should be visual albino pieds, which is pretty awesome. And then if they're not visual albino pieds, they'll be albinos, 100% het pieds. I absolutely love just the straight albinos too. And they sell really good at the reptile shows, which is pretty awesome. So the first thing I want to show you is I want to show you the male on this one. I actually bought a visual albino pied male. As a matter of fact, I actually did this cross once before, several years ago. And out of the whole clutch, I only produced one visual albino pied, and it was actually a female. And kind of the weird thing is I actually had it at home here in my collection, and I went to a reptile show, and it was one of my viewers on YouTube that ran into me at the reptile show, and they're like, hey, I know you actually hatched out this albino pied female, and I want to buy it even though it's not at the reptile show. So actually the following day, on the Sunday, the next day at the reptile show, I actually brought it to the show and sold it. And sure enough, he's actually here a couple years later. He's actually getting eggs from that female. And I thought, you know, I'll just produce another one and hold it back again in a future pairing. And but as a matter of fact, last year I did this pairing and that female didn't lay anything. So I'm kind of 2 years behind on my albino pied female that I actually wanted to get as a holdback here in my collection. And I actually looked in the tub this morning, and she looked like she was wrapped in a few eggs. Not that big of a female. I'm thinking maybe we'll get 6 eggs, maybe a couple more if we're lucky. It looked like she actually kicked one of the eggs out of the coil she was wrapped around those eggs, so it'll be kind of interesting to see how many eggs she actually has. And the first thing I want to show you is the male. I have a pretty amazing male albino pied that I bred to this girl. So let's jump over and check out that male albino pied. Alright, so I keep my albino pied male over in this 50-40 rack. Most of my males are in these smaller tubs because the males typically aren't as big as the females. And take a look at this beautiful snake. It's a really high white albino pied. And keep in mind, both the albino and the pied are both recessives. So if you actually take this and breed it to like a normal ball python, all the offspring will come out looking normal. And of course, one of the characteristics of the albino is the really bright red eyes. Pretty typical for almost all your albinos. It's a really visually dominant red eye that you mix anything else with the albino, and the eyes really stay a really bright red on these albinos. And it's kind of funny, I've actually seen some people where they say, you know, I really love the red eyes of the albinos, and some people say that they get kind of freaked out from the red eyes and don't want anything to do with the albinos, which is kind of the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I think it's really attractive with the really bright red eyes on the albinos. And this one is kind of interesting because it actually has a really small patch of color right here on the side of the snake. And when it was a really small snake, it used to be really more intense than this. This is really faded out from when it was small. And this, when it was small, it almost looked like someone put a tattoo right on the middle of the snake. As a matter of fact, the guy I bought it from actually named the snake Tattoo because it looked like it had a tattoo right in the middle of the snake. Now it's kind of faded out a bit as it's gotten older. So this snake was born in 2016 and it's 2021 now. So it's what, 5 years old. So that's a 5-year-old albino pied male. And then my female is over here in this ARS 7030 rack over here. So this is my albino het pied female. This is her second clutch of eggs. So take a look at this. I'm not sure how many eggs she's on. I see at least one more under there. And she's got one that's kind of kicked out over here from the side of the snake. So hopefully she'll have at least 6 eggs. And this one over on the side looks like it's a little bit beat up, a little kind of dimpled in a little bit, but I think it'll be perfectly fine for incubating. Shouldn't be a problem with that one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this girl out, pull the whole tub out, put it on the table, and we'll take this girl off of these eggs and see how many eggs are under this ball python. All right, so take a look at this girl. This girl looks like she has a few more eggs under there than I first looked at. It looks like there's at least maybe 4 eggs, which is pretty awesome. So, you know, usually a girl about this size will lay anywhere from 6 to 7 eggs. So that's kind of what I'm expecting. So let's pull this girl off of this clutch of eggs here. See how many she has. Oh, take a look at that. She's hiding them under there pretty good. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's awesome. So statistically, I should get 3 or 4 albino pies, assuming these are all good eggs. So the first thing you want to do is after a snake lays eggs, you always want to look to make sure that they passed all the eggs, that they don't have any eggs stuck in their belly. And this one looks like it's completely laid all the eggs. And look at that crazy color on this one. This is a really unique kind of a two-tone yellow with a bright white on the background. It's a pretty wild pattern that I haven't really seen on any other pie. It's almost like I mean, an albino. It looks like an albino on top of an albino. And I don't know if that has anything to do with the influence of the het pied in this one or not, because it's, you know, 100% het pied. We know for sure this one is het for pied. So I'm gonna put this girl down in this big boa tub. And then let's take a look at these beautiful eggs. All right, so not really stuck together, hardly at all. Take a look at that. Usually I kind of struggle separating the eggs, and in this case, it looks like they're all gonna come apart pretty easy. As a matter of fact, these are pretty thick and leathery, which is kind of surprising. So I've only been checking all my tubs once a day in the morning. So technically she could have laid these yesterday. So these could have been in there for, I guess, like a day and a half, because I found them this morning and I left them until now, which is, it's in the afternoon right now. So that was pretty easy. They all came apart super easy. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna candle these eggs and mark the embryos on top of the eggs. So I always like to incubate them with the embryos facing up. They say you get a better hatch rate with the embryos facing up, and it might be kind of difficult to actually see inside of these, but no, I guess not. they pretty much light up pretty good. Take a look at that. That is pretty awesome. You can see the embryo kind of moving around right there on the top. All right, I'm glad we're seeing embryos and veins in these. I had one clutch where I didn't see any embryos or veins, and man, this light is getting hot. You definitely don't want to put a really hot light too close to the eggs. You want to keep the light down away from the surface of the egg. You definitely don't want to put the light right on the egg, because it gets super hot, especially these little LED lights, which is kind of crazy, almost too hot to handle, which is pretty amazing. So take a look at this one. This has a weird embryo kind of on the dark side over on that one. Look at how long that egg is. Super long. I think that's the longest ball python egg that I have ever seen, which is pretty wild. And then this one that got kicked over on the side, let's see where the embryo is, right there. The embryo was on the bottom on that one, which is pretty interesting. All right, so I'm gonna mix up an egg box real quick. And to incubate the ball python eggs, I use the fine vermiculite. At least right now, you know, sometimes people kind of change the different substrates in their egg boxes, but it seems like this stuff has been working really good so far. And it usually takes about 2 scoops. I'm at 147 grams in 2 scoops. And I like to hit about 150. I'm getting to the point where I could probably just use 2 scoops and call it good without actually weighing it out every single time. And then what I do, we're at like 150.4, which is pretty awesome for just kind of throwing it in there. So then I zero the scale and then put 150 grams of, I use 90-degree distilled water. I actually microwave it for about 30 seconds, and it seems like it brings it right to temperature. So we're at like 60 grams. I need to go a little bit faster. It seems like I always overshoot the water. We're at 110. Let's see, 120, 130, 140, 151.9. Good enough. I always like to just kind of get it close as far as the weights and get it kind of consistent. I think a little bit more water is a little bit more beneficial, although it seems like, you know, 2 months into this incubation box, seems like it doesn't really matter if you have a little bit more water. I don't know if you'd want to go any less, because potentially you could have not enough water for the entire incubation period, which is one thing I'm always kind of worried about. So I just kind of mix it up really good. And then kind of, a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll mix it up and they'll say if you make a fist with the vermiculite and it kind of sticks together in a loose ball without any water coming out of it, which is quite a big range, I would say, from the, I'd say I'm probably on the bottom end as far as putting the amount of water in there that you could potentially, I think you could put a lot more water in there and still be okay without it, you know, being completely drenched. So that is my egg box. Should be good for the next 2 months in there. And then I want to put the eggs in the egg box. All right, so that is a pretty awesome clutch. As a matter of fact, this might be my most expensive clutch. So if I get like, you know, 4 or 5 albino pies from this could be actually worth probably more than any of the other clutches here in my collection, which is pretty amazing. Sometimes just one clutch from the right snake can really be a game changer in your whole season of ball pythons, which is kind of amazing. So you definitely want to keep them away from the sides so they're not touching the sides, because you get a lot of condensation that kind of pours down the side of the egg box. And then I use press and seal over the top. And so far, press and seal has been working really good for my egg boxes, and it seems like that's what a lot of people use. Seems like most of the people have been using the press and seal anymore. And then you could pretty much leave it like this right in the incubator, but I like to put a cover right on top of it. That way you can stack another egg box on top of it if you wanted. And then I went ahead and printed up 2 labels. So this crossing is my albino pied crossed with my albino het pied, so I just put the pairing in there. And then I put the lay date and the hatch date. These are going to hatch the 3rd of August, which is really super late. A lot of times the reptile shows in the fall are in August, so you're like right up against the reptile shows having eggs this late in the season, which is pretty amazing. And you have to remember too that if you bring snakes to the reptile shows, most people want you to have, you know, at least 2 or 3 weeks of feedings on those hatchlings, so you get them well started before you sell them at the reptile show. So that's another thing you have to pay attention, you know, when you're selling snakes at the reptile show. So that is pretty awesome. I want to put these 2 labels on the front of the egg box, put this box up in my incubator. All right, so take a look at my Ball Python egg incubator. Isn't that a beautiful thing? Completely filling up with all these ball python eggs. So right now I have 77 eggs in this incubator. That is pretty amazing. I think I have 1 or 2 females that might lay. I have one that's, I don't know, she's looking like she might lay, so I might have 1 more clutch after this, and then another one that's a possibility. But that's pretty much it for my ball pythons. And usually, it's pretty funny. I got to the point one year when I had such a good year. I had like, I think it was like 110 eggs in the whole season. And I got to the point where they were hatching at the same time I was putting them in the incubator. So I didn't have enough room in my incubator. And it was just so happened that as soon as some would hatch and I'd pull some out, I'd get another clutch and put them in. And luckily, I didn't run out of room in that incubator. I do have another incubator that I could use, which is a different type of an incubator. It's like a scientific incubator. I could probably hold maybe 6 or 7 clutches in there, but so far I haven't, you know, had to use that. I haven't had that many ball python females lay, but look at all these boxes of ball python eggs, which is pretty amazing. So this one I put on the bottom, so they're pretty much in order of when they're going to hatch. So the ones that'll hatch first are up on the top. So this one's going to hatch hatch in just a couple weeks. I think it's like 2.5 or 2 weeks. It's going to hatch the 22nd of June, which is pretty awesome. So that's pretty much the most exciting part, is going through all these eggs and then cutting them and seeing what your results are. So probably the next video I'm going to do is I want to go through all these egg boxes, make sure all the eggs are looking good. I want to check on this one in the next video where I had that really bad moldy egg and I put it in there with some springtails and some potting soil and some sphagnum moss. Hopefully that one's doing pretty good. And then I had another one. I tried to dump some springtails in this one. I'm sure all the springtails probably died because it wasn't the right environment, but I had some that were kind of iffy in that box. So if I see that the springtails are working, I might migrate some of my bad eggs, some of the eggs that are kind of looking like they're getting moldy, and move them over to that box. But that is pretty exciting. Let me tell you, I'm doing a lot better than last year. I think last year I only had like 50 eggs, which is pretty crazy. So I'm like way ahead of last year as far as my ball python season, which is pretty exciting. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.